The bar was louder than usual for a Thursday night. Our group had claimed a corner booth, and the mix of music and laughter bounced off the walls. Lila sat across from me, nursing her third margarita and avoiding my eyes. She looked off. Normally, Lila was the life of the party, cracking jokes and teasing everyone, but tonight she was quieter, fidgety. It didn't escape my notice. I glanced over at Nora. My wife was laughing at something Adam said, her head tilted slightly, her hand brushing his shoulder as she leaned closer. A flicker of annoyance hit me, but I brushed it off. They'd been friends for years. Nothing unusual there, right? Still, Lila's odd behavior gnawed at me. When I caught her eye, she immediately looked down, swirling her drink like it held the answers to life's mysteries. I leaned forward. Lila, you okay? You've been quiet tonight. She blinked, her cheeks reddening. Yeah, just long day at work. Her words were slurred, and the way she stumbled over them told me it wasn't the truth. Before I could press further, she downed the rest of her drink and muttered, "You deserve someone better, Jonah." The words hit me like a sucker punch. What? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Her eyes widened slightly, but she quickly waved it off, laughing nervously. Forget I said that. Too much tequila, you know? She tried to stand, wobbling as she did. I need air. I sat there, stunned. You deserve someone better. What the hell was that supposed to mean? I looked at Nora again. She was now engrossed in conversation with Adam, their heads too close for my liking. A knot tightened in my chest. When Lila returned, she was all smiles, acting as if nothing had happened. But I wasn't buying it. As the night wound down, I noticed her avoiding me, almost as if she was afraid I'd corner her. My mind churned with possibilities, none of them good. At home, I couldn't shake the unease. Nora kicked off her heels by the door and went straight to the bedroom, tossing her purse onto the dresser. I followed her, leaning against the doorway as she changed into a t-shirt and shorts. So, Lila said something weird tonight. I began, keeping my tone casual. Nora froze for just a fraction of a second, barely noticeable, but I caught it. Weird how? She asked, not turning around. She said I deserve someone better. Nora snorted, finally facing me. She was drunk, Jonah. Don't read too much into it. Yeah, but why would she say that? I pressed. It felt pointed. Nora rolled her eyes. You know how Lila gets when she drinks. She probably thought she was being deep or something. She climbed into bed, pulling the covers up. You're overthinking it. Maybe, I muttered, but I didn't believe her. Something about the way she dismissed it so quickly, too quickly, made my gut churn. As I lay beside her, staring at the ceiling, my mind replayed the night in relentless loops. The odd look on Lila's face, the way Nora and Adam had been glued to each other, the fleeting hesitation when I brought it up. None of it sat right with me. Nora turned over, her back to me, and within minutes her breathing evened out. She was asleep, or pretending to be. I stared at the dark ceiling, my thoughts racing. Lila's words weren't meaningless. They couldn't be. And if she knew something, I was damn well going to find out what it was. The next day, I texted Lila, asking her to meet me for coffee. She responded after a long delay with a reluctant, okay, and we agreed on a small cafe a few blocks from her apartment. I knew she'd be squirming the entire time leading up to the meeting. Good. She owed me answers. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting at a corner table with a latte clutched in both hands. She looked up as I approached, her face pale, her eyes darting everywhere but at me. It was obvious she wanted to be anywhere else. I didn't waste time. Lila, I need you to explain what you meant last night. Her shoulders tensed, and she avoided my gaze, staring down into her cup like it might save her. I already told you, Jonah. I was drunk. I didn't mean anything by it. Bullshit. My voice came out sharper than I intended, and a few heads turned in our direction. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. Look, I'm not here to play games. You don't say something like that and expect me to just drop it. What do you know, Lila? She looked around nervously, her fingers gripping the cup so tightly I thought it might shatter. Finally, she let out a shaky breath. Jonah, I didn't want to be the one to tell you. Tell me what? I demanded, my patience wearing thin. She hesitated, then dropped her gaze. Nora's been seeing someone behind your back. The words landed like a hammer. My heart pounded in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. Who? I asked, my voice low and steady. Lila shook her head, her eyes glistening. I don't know if I should. Don't play coy with me, I snapped. You've clearly been covering for her. Who is it, Lila? Her lip quivered, and for a moment, I thought she might start crying. Then she whispered, it's someone in our group. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. My mind raced, flipping through faces. Adam, Chris, Emily, Sarah. It felt like a sick lottery, and I had no idea who the unlucky winner was. Lila rushed to fill the silence. I didn't want to get involved, Jonah. I swear. But she's my friend, and I didn't know what to do. She begged me not to say anything. I clenched my fists under the table, trying to steady myself. How long has this been going on? A few months, I think, she mumbled. I'm not sure. My vision blurred with anger. A few months. All those late nights, the sudden need for space, the uptick in work events. It all made sense now. I'd been blind, and Nora had been taking full advantage of my trust. Who is it, Lila? I repeated, my voice cold and unforgiving. She shook her head again. I can't, Jonah. Please don't make me. I leaned forward, fixing her with a glare. If you don't tell me, I'll find out myself. And when I do, I won't be nearly as forgiving. Lila flinched, but she didn't respond. Instead, she gathered her things and stood up, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, Jonah, she said before hurrying out of the cafe, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I sat there for a long time, my mind swirling with rage and betrayal. Someone in our group. It felt like a knife twisting in my gut. These were people I trusted, people I considered friends. When I finally left, I wasn't any closer to answers, but one thing was clear. I couldn't let this slide. If Lila wouldn't tell me, I'd figure it out on my own. And when I did, there'd be hell to pay. I didn't sleep that night. My mind wouldn't let me rest, not with this unresolved. Lila's words replayed in my head. Someone in our group. I stared at the ceiling, cycling through names and faces, looking for the smallest clue I might have missed. By morning, I had a short list of suspects. Adam was at the top. It felt like a gut punch to even consider him. Adam and I had been best friends since college, the kind of guy you'd trust with anything. But the more I thought about it, the more things clicked into place. His constant suggestions to give Nora some space. The way he always seemed to defend her, even when I'd vented my frustrations. His lingering glances at her when he thought no one was looking. It all seemed so obvious now. I decided to watch. If Adam was the one, he'd slip up eventually. That weekend, the group gathered for a barbecue at Chris's house. It was one of those events where everyone brought something half-assed, a bag of chips, a pack of beer, and called it a contribution. The smell of burgers and charcoal filled the air, and the usual buzz of chatter surrounded me. But I wasn't here to enjoy myself. I was here to observe. I kept an eye on Adam and Nora. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. They didn't sit together or share any obvious moments. But as the day went on, little things started to stand out. The way they avoided eye contact when they thought I was watching. The way Nora laughed just a little too hard at Adam's jokes. The quick touch on her arm as he passed by. They were careful, but not careful enough. I wasn't the only one who noticed. Lila was there, too, and every time Adam and Nora interacted, her face twisted with guilt. At one point, she caught me staring and quickly looked away. That confirmed it. She knew more than she'd admitted. I cornered her by the drink table, my voice low so no one else could hear. You're going to tell me the truth, Lila, right now. She froze, her hand trembling as she poured herself a soda. Jonah, I told you everything. Don't lie to me. My voice was hard, and she flinched. It's Adam, isn't it? Her eyes darted around, checking to see if anyone was close enough to overhear. Then she nodded, barely perceptible, and whispered, yes, it's Adam. I felt my blood boil. My best friend, the guy I'd trusted with everything, the guy who'd been my rock during all the tough times in my marriage. He was screwing my wife. Why didn't you tell me before? I hissed. I didn't want to be the one to blow everything up, she said, her voice shaky. Nora begged me not to say anything. I thought, I thought maybe she'd ended on her own. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. And you've just been sitting on this? Watching them betray me? Lila's face crumpled. I'm sorry, Jonah. I didn't know what to do. Stay out of it now, I growled. You've done enough. The rest of the barbecue passed in a blur. I kept my distance from Adam and Nora, but every time I looked at them, the rage simmered beneath my skin. I wanted to confront them right then and there, but I held back. This wasn't the time or place. I needed to think. I needed a plan. By the time I got home, I was exhausted, but my mind was sharper than ever. Nora walked into the house a few minutes after me, humming like nothing was wrong. It made my stomach turn. Did you have fun? She asked, tossing her purse onto the counter. Yeah, I said, forcing a smile. Good to see everyone again. She kissed my cheek and headed to the bedroom. It took everything in me not to grab her and demand the truth, but I held back. I wasn't ready for that confrontation yet. Not without proof. Not without a way to make her and Adam pay for what they'd done. As I stood in the kitchen, staring at the spot where her purse sat, a thought struck me. Slowly, deliberately, I walked over and opened it. Inside, I found her phone. It was locked, of course, but I knew her passcode. I'd known it for years. My hands trembled slightly as I unlocked it and scrolled through her messages. Most of them were innocuous. Texts from coworkers, reminders from her mom, updates from friends. But then I saw Adam's name. I opened the thread. There it was in black and white. Flirtatious messages, plans to meet up, professions of love. My chest tightened as I scrolled, reading one damning text after another. The latest exchange confirmed they'd been together just 2 days ago, when Nora had told me she was working late. The betrayal hit like a freight train, but it also fueled something dark inside me. This wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore. This was about revenge. Nora and Adam had no idea what was coming. I spent the next few days playing my part perfectly. Nora had no clue I'd found the messages, no idea I was piecing together a plan to confront her and Adam in the most humiliating way possible. She carried on as if nothing had changed, smiling, laughing, and even cuddling up to me at night. Every touch, every word from her felt like poison. Adam was just as oblivious. He still cracked jokes in our group chat, still acted like my best friend whenever we spoke. The audacity of it all made my blood boil, but I kept my cool. I'd waited this long. I could wait a little longer to make them pay. The idea came to me while staring at the messages again, reading their plans to meet in secret. I needed to expose them in a way they couldn't wriggle out of, in front of the people they cared about most. A camping trip was perfect, intimate, secluded, and full of witnesses. They wouldn't be able to deny anything once I laid out the evidence. The group had been talking about a camping trip for months, and I took the lead in organizing it. Everyone was thrilled to finally get out into the woods for a weekend, especially Adam. He even offered to help me plan it, which I found almost laughable. If only he knew what I had in store. I reached out to Lila separately. She was hesitant at first, but after a little persuasion, okay, a lot, she agreed to help. She sent me a few photos she'd taken of Nora and Adam together, enough to confirm the affair without needing to say a word. I didn't ask why she'd taken them in the first place. I didn't care. All I needed was the evidence. Are you sure about this? She asked over the phone one night, her voice trembling. I'm sure, I said coldly. They don't get to walk away from this unscathed. She sighed but didn't argue. I could tell she felt guilty, but that wasn't my problem. She'd helped Nora betray me. This was the least she could do. The trip was set for the following weekend. We chose a remote campsite about an hour out of town, far enough from civilization to ensure no interruptions. Nora seemed excited when I told her, her eyes lighting up at the thought of spending time with the group. If only she knew why I was really doing this. The week leading up to the trip was excruciating, pretending everything was fine, sleeping next to her every night, holding back the urge to confront her. It was torture, but I kept reminding myself of the end goal. Just a few more days. On the morning of the trip, I packed the car with all the essentials: tents, sleeping bags, coolers, and one very specific folder containing screenshots of Nora and Adam's messages, along with the photos Lila had given me. I didn't plan to use it until the time was right, but having it there felt like carrying a loaded gun. Nora and I drove together, making small talk as if nothing was wrong. She even held my hand at one point, her thumb brushing over my knuckles. The gesture made me sick, but I smiled and played along. She had no idea she was walking straight into a trap. When we arrived at the campsite, Adam was already there, unloading gear from his truck. He greeted me with a big grin and a slap on the back, like we were still best friends. I clenched my jaw but managed to smile. "Ready for a great weekend?" I asked, my voice calm and steady. "Always," he replied, completely unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. The rest of the group trickled in over the next hour, and soon enough, the campsite was bustling with activity. Tents went up, coolers were unpacked, and the smell of grilling meat filled the air. On the surface, it was just another fun weekend with friends. But I couldn't stop watching them, Adam and Nora. Every interaction between them felt like a slap in the face. Nora was good at pretending. She laughed and joked with everyone, even stealing glances at me like nothing was wrong. But Adam? He was sloppier. I caught him staring at her more than once, his gaze lingering a little too long. It was subtle, but not subtle enough. As night fell and the group gathered around the campfire, I knew the time was coming. I watched them both, my chest tightening with anticipation. This wasn't going to be pretty, but it had to be done. They'd fooled me for long enough. Tonight, the truth would come out, and they wouldn't be able to hide from it. The fire crackled in the middle of our circle, casting long shadows against the surrounding trees. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and roasted marshmallows, but I could barely taste mine. My focus was locked on Nora and Adam. They sat on opposite sides of the fire, but their stolen glances were like a secret language only they shared. It made my stomach turn. Everyone was relaxed, laughing and swapping stories. Nora played the perfect wife, leaning into me occasionally, her hand brushing against my knee like she still had a right to touch me. Adam, on the other hand, had an edge of nervous energy, glancing around like he expected something to go wrong. He wasn't wrong. I waited until the conversation started to die down, the easy laughter giving way to the kind of quiet that comes with too much food and too much beer. Perfect. I stood, brushing off my hands and letting my gaze sweep over the group. "All right," I said, my voice cutting through the stillness. "I've got a question for everyone. A little thought experiment, if you will." A few of them perked up, curious. Adam shifted in his seat, and Nora looked at me with mild confusion. "What kind of question?" Chris asked, leaning forward. I smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "What would you do if you found out someone you trusted, someone close to you, was stabbing you in the back?" The mood shifted instantly. The laughter and warmth evaporated, replaced by an uncomfortable tension. Everyone exchanged glances, unsure if I was joking. "What kind of question is that?" Nora asked, forcing a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "A serious one," I said, locking my gaze on hers. "What would you do, Nora?" She blinked, her smile faltering. "I don't know, Jonah. That's kind of a dark topic for a camping trip, don't you think?" "Maybe," I said, shrugging. "But it's been on my mind a lot lately. Betrayal. Lies. You know, the kind of things that ruin relationships." Nora's face paled, and Adam shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The rest of the group looked from me to them, sensing the brewing storm but unsure of its source. "Jonah," Lila said softly, her voice a mix of guilt and warning. I ignored her. "See, I've been thinking about how easy it is for people to hide things," I continued, pacing around the fire. "How they can smile to your face while twisting the knife behind your back. It's amazing, really. But eventually, the truth comes out." Adam cleared his throat, his voice shaky. "All right, man. I think we get it. Maybe it's time to move on." "No," I interrupted sharply, turning to face him. "I don't think I'm done." The group was dead silent now, everyone frozen in place. I reached into my backpack, pulling out the folder I'd brought. My hands were steady as I opened it and withdrew the first set of papers. "These," I said, holding up the printed messages, "are texts between Nora and Adam. Gasps erupted around the fire, and Adam shot to his feet. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, his voice shaking. "Sit down," I said coldly, my voice leaving no room for argument. He hesitated but obeyed, his face pale. Nora was frozen in place, her eyes wide as she stared at the papers in my hand. "Jonah," she started, her voice trembling. "I can explain." "Don't." My voice was low, dangerous. "You've lied enough. I think it's time everyone hears the truth." I stepped closer to the fire, holding the papers high enough for everyone to see. "This isn't just a couple of flirty texts. It's months of planning, sneaking around, and making me look like a fool. And it's all right here." The silence was deafening. I dropped the papers onto the ground, letting them scatter in the firelight. Then I pulled out my phone and opened the photo Lila had given me, Nora and Adam, caught in an intimate moment. I turned the screen so everyone could see. The group erupted into chaos. Chris stood, shouting at Adam. Lila buried her face in her hands. Nora was crying now, pleading with me to stop. "Jonah, please," she begged, her voice breaking. "Don't do this." I turned to her, my voice cold and unwavering. "You did this, Nora. You and Adam. You ruined everything." Adam tried to speak, but I cut him off with a glare that made him shrink back. "Save it. You don't get to explain. You don't get to justify it. You're a liar and a coward, both of you." I stepped back, looking at the faces around the fire. Some were stunned, some angry, and some just looked sad. I didn't care. This wasn't about them. It was about exposing the truth and watching them squirm. Without another word, I turned and walked away from the fire, leaving the group to deal with the fallout. Behind me, Nora's sobs and Adam's frantic attempts at damage control faded into the night. I didn't stop walking until I was far enough away that the only sounds were the rustling trees and my own steady breathing. They thought they could betray me and get away with it. They were wrong. I drove home alone the next morning, leaving the campsite and the wreckage of their lives behind me. The quiet hum of the engine was the only sound as I replayed the chaos from the night before. Nora's face, pale and tear-streaked. Adam, stumbling over his words, trying to salvage his image. The shocked gasps from our so-called friends. It was all exactly as I'd planned. When I reached the house, I walked in without hesitation. The space felt hollow, stripped of the trust and warmth it once held. I went straight to the bedroom, grabbed my suitcase, and started packing. Clothes, essentials, the things that mattered, though, in that moment, very little seemed to. My wedding photo on the dresser caught my eye, and for a second, anger flared in my chest. I grabbed it and threw it into the trash, the glass frame shattering on impact. I wasn't staying here another night. By midday, I'd spoken to a lawyer. The papers would be drawn up by the end of the week, and I made it clear they should include every damning detail of the affair. Nora wouldn't get a dime more than she deserved, which was nothing. By the time I finished, my phone buzzed with a message from Adam. I stared at the screen, debating whether to read it, but curiosity got the better of me. His message was a pathetic attempt at damage control. "Jonah, man, I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen. Please, let's talk." I clenched my teeth, my grip tightening on the phone. Never meant for this to happen? What a joke. He'd planned it, lied to my face, and now he wanted forgiveness? I deleted the message without replying. He wasn't worth the time or energy. By evening, I was settled into a small rental apartment across town. It wasn't much, a single bedroom with outdated furniture, but it was mine. It was quiet, free of her. Nora tried to call several times that night. I ignored every attempt, letting them go to voicemail. Her messages started as pleas, soft, tearful confessions that made my stomach turn. Then they grew desperate, her voice cracking as she begged me to come home. By the last message, her tone had shifted. "You're making a mistake, Jonah," she hissed, venom dripping from her words. "You're throwing away everything we built because of one mistake. You'll regret this." I laughed bitterly, deleting the messages. The only thing I regretted was trusting her in the first place. Over the next week, the fallout spread like wildfire through our friend group. Chris called to check in, saying the camping trip had been a disaster after I left. People had turned on Adam and Nora immediately, their denials falling flat against the mountain of evidence I'd presented. "I don't know how you kept your cool, man," Chris said. "If it were me, I'd have knocked Adam out on the spot." I didn't respond, though the thought had crossed my mind more than once. Lila reached out too, apologizing profusely for her role in everything. She sounded sincere, but I couldn't bring myself to forgive her fully. "You knew," I told her. "You knew and said nothing. That makes you just as guilty." She started to cry, but I hung up before she could drag me into her guilt. I didn't have the energy to deal with it. My focus was on severing ties, cutting out the rot that had infected my life. Adam tried to reach out again, but I blocked his number. Nora didn't bother after that first round of calls. I figured she'd given up or was too busy dealing with the consequences of her actions. The divorce papers were sent by courier, and I imagined the shock on her face when she saw the list of grievances spelled out in black and white. Part of me wanted to confront her one last time, to make her admit to everything face to face. But I realized it didn't matter anymore. I had the truth, the evidence, and the upper hand. She had nothing. The silence was better. It gave me space to think, to process, to plan my next move. By the end of the week, I'd started reconnecting with the people who truly mattered. Evan, a friend from college who'd always been loyal, reached out after hearing about the fallout. We grabbed beers at a local bar, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again. "Forget them, man," Evan said, clinking his glass against mine. "You're better off without the drama." He was right. I didn't need Nora, Adam, or anyone who couldn't be trusted. What I needed was to rebuild, to find people who valued loyalty and honesty. As I sipped my beer and listened to Evan talk about his latest project, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The past was behind me. Nora and Adam could deal with the mess they'd made. I had my own life to live, and I wasn't wasting another second on them. The day the divorce was finalized, I stood outside the courthouse with the papers in my hand. It was a cold, crisp morning, the kind where the air cuts clean through you. But for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel weighed down. The last ties to Nora were severed. Her betrayal was now just a legal footnote, and I was free to move forward. I folded the papers neatly and slipped them into my jacket pocket. My phone buzzed. Chris had texted me. "Saw the news. Congrats on ditching her. Drinks tonight?" I smirked and typed back a quick reply. "You bet." There was something cathartic about closing that chapter so thoroughly. Nora had tried one last time to fight the terms of the divorce, claiming I was being unfair. Her lawyer even suggested mediation, but the evidence I'd provided made any negotiation pointless. She left with nothing but her guilt and a reputation in shambles. The fallout from the camping trip continued to ripple through our friend group. Adam was ostracized almost immediately. No one wanted to associate with a guy who betrayed his best friend. Chris told me that Adam had been trying to save face, spinning some story about how he and Nora had fallen in love, but no one was buying it. I heard through the grapevine that Adam lost his job shortly after everything came to light. Apparently, sleeping with your best friend's wife doesn't win you many allies in the workplace. Nora wasn't faring much better. People started pulling away from her, and the invitations to brunches and get-togethers dried up. She built her social circle around people who valued loyalty, and now she had none. I sold the house. It was too full of memories I didn't want anymore, reminders of a life that had been nothing but a lie. The proceeds went into starting fresh, a new apartment, simple but comfortable, and far enough from the old neighborhood that I didn't have to risk running into Nora or Adam. Moving in felt like turning a page. I unpacked slowly, taking the time to decide where everything should go, like putting the pieces of myself back together. The new place wasn't much, but it was mine. No ghosts, no lies. Evan became a regular fixture in my life again. We'd fallen out of touch over the years, but he'd always been solid, the kind of friend who showed up when it mattered. He dragged me out to bars, introduced me to new people, and reminded me what it felt like to laugh without a weight on my chest. "Man, you're lucky it ended when it did," he said one night over drinks. "Imagine spending another decade with someone like that." I nodded, tipping back my beer. He was right. I'd been spared a lifetime of lies and manipulation, and I wasn't about to waste my second chance. One evening, As I unpacked the last of the boxes, I found the folder I'd used to collect the evidence against Nora and Adam. Inside were the screenshots, the photos, everything that had shattered my marriage. I stared at it for a long moment, then grabbed a lighter from the kitchen. Out on the balcony, I set the papers ablaze. The fire consumed them quickly, the edges curling into ash and embers. I watched until there was nothing left but smoke trailing into the night sky. It was strangely satisfying, like letting go of a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. A few months later, I found myself in a new routine: work, gym, dinners with friends, simple things that felt normal, but better. I wasn't constantly looking over my shoulder or questioning the people around me. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control of my life. Nora tried to reach out once, sending a long-winded email about how much she missed me and how she'd made a mistake. I didn't bother replying. Let her live with the consequences of her actions. She'd made her choice and I'd made mine. Subscribe so you don't miss new stories on the channel.